you say this should be a considerable addition to our armoury in responding to the number of other cases that may have been stirred up by Mr. Castleton's letters in the Sub-Postmaster magazine. One letter tried to get something like class actions. He certainly had other agents writing in reply to him and suggested more cases. Thanks, Rod. So firstly, you were an important voice in giving Mandy Talbot instructions in the case, weren't you?
I wouldn't give Mandy instructions, but I've fed back in a way that I'm kind of not proud of looking at that reply, but I would not be giving Mandy instructions.
You say that you support her recommendations, don't you?
There's a difference between supporting and instructing somebody. So Mandy must have made a proposal about something and I've agreed with it.
You were an enthusiastic adopter of her advice that the case should be weaponised to use against others, weren't you?
I think we believed that when there were shortages found at audit, possibly wrongly, my belief from what auditors were saying to me that they'd found was that actually there was a genuine theft of something. So
when I suggested on the last occasion that Mrs. Talbot was seeking to use the result, weaponise it for other sub-postmasters and make them wary of taking the post office on, I obviously had no idea that you would say that it would be an addition to your armoury. That's how you viewed it, didn't you?
Well, that's what I've said, yeah.
Why did you view the post office as having an armoury to be used against sub-postmasters?
Well, I don't know why I've used that language there. That's not pleasant language, but I've said...
Last time you were criticising Mandy Talbot for using unpleasant language, and far from you doing that at the time, you gleefully adopted it, didn't you?
Well, clearly I have in there, and I couldn't remember having said it, but you've produced this email, and I did, so I'm sorry, I'm not proud of what's in that email, but I felt not proud of what you'd showed me before of what other people were saying, and now evidently I've said something similar.
Were your answers that I just read to you on the last occasion truthful, where you suggested that Mrs. Talbot was being unpleasant and that you rather disagreed with what she was suggesting?
Sorry, what do you mean there?
Well, you said, where Mandy Talbot is speaking about using this case against other sub-postmasters
right.
to put them off from taking us on, that was unpleasant.
Yes, that sounded like that, and I couldn't remember the reply that I'd made here, and in light of the reply that I've made here, now that I can see that, which I couldn't remember when we spoke before, I'd say, well, neither of us said something very nice there.
You wanted to use Mr. Castleton's case as something to be used to suppress complaints from other people who are having trouble with Horizon, didn't you?
I understood in this case, and I've hesitated to use the complete narrative out of the witness statement that was shared with me before, but I understood in this case that the safe doors were open, the office doors were open, and somebody came back in a state into the office there, and that there'd been all sorts of audit satisfaction that money had been stolen. So it's, in hindsight, that may have been totally wrong, and what's been said by the person who'd written that witness statement suggests that it was a not a reliable witness statement to have been put. But that was the kind of stuff that was influencing my perspective, where we'd got this particular case in this item here. And I mean, you may not agree with me, but that context of auditors went to a branch because there was some suspicion that led them to go there, and when they found all the doors open and the things that were in that statement, that would reinforce, well, probably there was a theft that happened. And so perhaps wrongly in the whole context of it, that was the context of what was in my mind at the time. And because auditors would also say, we've had confessions in one of these visits, but later on, months down the line, somebody retracts a confession. That wrongly perhaps is amplifying itself into my head, to think, well, if allegations are being made, it's a change of response late in the day, and perhaps is an inappropriate response, and I and others doubted the validity of those allegations that were being made. In hindsight, we should have been listening to them. It was probably a wrong context, but I and others in management were operating in a context where auditors went to branches because there was some suspicion, and the statements that they were getting from them reinforced that suspicion.
Who was responsible for signing off the expenditure of very high levels of legal costs on civil litigation at this time?
I don't know, but I would expect that would have been up to a legal director or board level.